So I'm sitting here thinking about how everything went to hell. And honestly, it's like everyone lost their damn minds at the same time. 6 years I gave that man. 6 effing years. And this is how it ends. With me getting treated like some kind of criminal, while Brad gets to play the wounded hero. The whole thing is so backwards I don't even know where to start. But fine, let me tell you the real story. Because apparently everyone's been getting the wrong version. It all started on this Caribbean cruise 6 years ago. I was 25, looking absolutely incredible in this white sundress that cost me 3 paychecks but was so worth it. My best friend Megan had dragged me on this trip after my breakup with this loser who couldn't even hold down a job. You need to get back out there, she kept saying. And thank goodness she did, because that's where I met Brad. He was sitting at the pool bar, reading some book about finance or economics or whatever, looking all serious and intellectual. Most guys on cruises are just there to get wasted and hook up with anything that moves. But Brad seemed different, mature, like he actually had his life together. Plus he was gorgeous, tall, dark hair. These amazing blue eyes that actually looked up from his book when I walked by. I made sure to walk by that bar about 5 times before he finally said something. Good book? I asked, sliding onto the stool next to him like it was the most natural thing in the world. He smiled, this shy, genuine smile that made my stomach do flips, and started explaining whatever boring business theory he was reading about. I nodded along like I was fascinated, asking all the right questions, laughing at his little jokes. The guy was practically melting. By the second day, we were inseparable. I made sure of that. While other girls were stumbling around drunk and desperate, I was being the perfect vacation romance. Sweet. Interested in his stories. Impressed by his career plans. He worked in financial consulting and had this whole 5-year plan mapped out. Most guys his age were still figuring out what they wanted for lunch. But Brad knew exactly where he was going. That kind of stability was exactly what I needed. The sex was incredible too, which definitely didn't hurt. He was attentive, generous, actually cared about making me feel good instead of just getting himself off like most guys. We'd spend hours in his cabin, talking and laughing and just connecting on this deep level I'd never experienced before. He told me about his family, his dreams, his fears, stuff guys usually keep locked up tight. I felt like I was seeing the real him, and he was perfect. When the cruise ended, I was not about to let this one get away. I made sure to exchange numbers, emails, everything. I know long distance is hard, I told him, but I really think we have something special here. He agreed completely. The poor guy was already halfway in love with me. That first year was actually kind of romantic. In a challenging way, we'd talk for hours every night, text constantly throughout the day. I made sure to be the perfect long-distance girlfriend, supportive, understanding, never clingy or demanding. When he had to work late, I was encouraging. When he was stressed about some project, I listened and offered advice. I sent care packages, surprise deliveries to his office, cute photos to brighten his day. I was everything he needed. Meanwhile, I was building my own life too. I had a decent job at a marketing firm, a nice apartment, good friends. I wasn't just sitting around waiting for him like some pathetic girl. I was proving that I could be independent and devoted at the same time. The perfect girlfriend package. Brad would fly out to visit me every few weeks, or I'd go see him. Those weekends were like mini honeymoons. We'd explore whatever city we were in, try new restaurants, spend entire days in bed just talking and being together. He met my friends, and they all loved him. He's perfect for you, Megan kept saying. Don't let this one go. Not that I was planning to. By month 10, we were already talking about me moving to San Diego to be with him. He'd found this great condo we could rent together, walking distance from the beach. I can't wait to wake up next to you every morning, he told me during one of our late-night calls. The way he said it, all soft and sincere, made me feel like the luckiest girl alive. Moving in together was exactly as amazing as I'd imagined. The condo was gorgeous, 2 bedrooms, huge windows. This kitchen that made me actually want to learn how to cook. Brad had already bought furniture and everything, but he made sure to ask my opinion on decorations and colors. He wanted it to feel like our place, not just his place that I happened to live in. Those first few months were like playing house with my dream guy. I'd wake up to him making coffee, steal sips from his mug while he got ready for work. He'd come home to me cooking dinner, okay, mostly reheating takeout. But I was trying, and we'd sit on the couch talking about our days. Weekends were perfect too. We'd sleep in late, go for walks on the beach, meet up with his friends for drinks. Everyone loved us together. We were that couple that other people wanted to be. Brad proposed on our 2-year anniversary, right there on the beach where we'd had our first official date as a couple living in the same city. He'd planned this whole romantic setup, sunset, champagne, this gorgeous ring that probably cost more than my car. I knew from that first day on the cruise that you were the one. he said, getting down on one knee right there in the sand. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Of course I said yes. How could I not? This was everything I'd ever wanted. A gorgeous, successful, devoted guy who worshipped the ground I walked on. We were perfect together. The wedding was beautiful. Small but elegant. Just our families and closest friends. I looked absolutely stunning in this designer dress that cost a fortune, but was so worth it for the way Brad's face lit up when he saw me walking down the aisle. His vows made half the guests cry. All this stuff about how I'd changed his life, made him believe in true love, how he couldn't imagine existing without me. I felt like a princess. Married life started out great. We fell into this comfortable routine where everything just worked. Brad would leave for work around 8. I'd head to my job at the marketing firm, and we'd meet up for dinner most nights. Weekends were for exploring the city, hanging out with friends, or just relaxing at home together. It was stable and peaceful, and exactly what I thought I wanted. But after about a year, I started feeling restless, not unhappy exactly, just like something was missing. The excitement of those early days had settled into this predictable pattern where I could basically plan out our entire week in advance. Brad would come home, we'd eat dinner, watch Netflix, go to bed, rinse and repeat. Even our sex life had become routine, same positions, same timing, same everything. I tried talking to him about mixing things up, maybe taking a spontaneous weekend trip or trying new restaurants or something. But Brad liked his routines. He'd worked hard to build this stable life, and he didn't see why we needed to change anything when everything was working fine. We're happy. He'd say, why fix what's not broken? But I wasn't broken. I was just bored. Is that so terrible? I was 28 years old, married to a guy who treated every day like it was exactly the same as the day before. Where was the passion, the excitement, the feeling like anything could happen? That's when Megan started inviting me out for girls' nights again. You've been so coupley lately, she said. When's the last time we just had fun together? She was right. I'd been so focused on being the perfect wife that I'd forgotten how to be myself. So I started joining her for drinks after work, or weekend shopping trips, or just hanging out at her apartment like we used to before I got married. Brad was fine with it at first. You should spend time with your friends, he said. I don't want you to feel tied down. See, he was being supportive, encouraging, even so when girls' nights started happening twice a week instead of once. He didn't complain. When I started staying over at Megan's place sometimes because we'd been drinking, and it was easier than getting a ride home. He just said he was glad I was being safe. It was during one of these nights out that I met Jordan. Megan had invited him and a few other people over to her place after we'd been bar hopping. And the second he walked in, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. That electric attraction, that flutter of possibility. He was different from Brad, more spontaneous, more playful. Where Brad was all careful planning and responsible decisions, Jordan was pure energy and excitement. We talked for hours that night while everyone else was drinking and being loud. He told me about his photography business, all these amazing places he'd traveled for shoots. He'd lived in New York, Los Angeles, even spent a year in Europe just exploring and taking pictures. Life's too short to play it safe, he said, and something about the way he looked at me when he said it made my heart race. Nothing happened that first night. I wasn't that kind of person, but I couldn't stop thinking about him, about how alive I'd felt just talking to someone who saw the world differently than Brad did. When Megan mentioned he'd be at her place again the following weekend, I made sure to be there too. This time we talked even more. He showed me some of his photography on his phone. These incredible shots of sunsets and cityscapes and people caught in perfect candid moments. You have such an interesting face, he told me, studying me like I was one of his subjects. Great bone structure. You'd be amazing to photograph. No one had ever talked to me like that before. Like I was art instead of just another person. Brad never noticed anything different about me. When I came home glowing and energized from these nights out, he'd just smile and ask if I'd had fun, then go back to whatever he was doing. It was like he couldn't see that his wife was coming alive again, rediscovering parts of herself that had been buried under all that domestic routine. The third time I saw Jordan, he kissed me. We were on Megan's balcony, looking out at the city lights, and he just leaned over and kissed me like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I kissed him back because it felt incredible, like waking up after a long sleep. I've been wanting to do that since the first night I met you, he whispered, and I believed him completely. I should have felt guilty, but I didn't. I felt alive. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again instead of just Brad's wife. This amazing, talented, passionate man wanted me, not the domestic goddess version I'd been playing, but the real me, the me who craved adventure and spontaneity and excitement. So when Jordan suggested we go back to his place, I said yes. And when Megan offered to cover for me, telling Brad I'd had too much to drink and needed to sleep it off at her place, I let her, because for once in my life, I was going to do something just for me. The night with Jordan was everything my marriage had stopped being. Passionate, unpredictable, intense. He looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. He touched me like he couldn't get enough. We talked until sunrise about dreams and art and all the places we wanted to travel. I felt like I was remembering who I used to be before I became half of a couple. When I got home the next morning, Brad was making pancakes and reading the newspaper like it was any other Sunday. "Feel better?" he asked, not even looking up. "Megan said you were pretty wasted." I told him I was fine, just tired. And he nodded and went back to his paper. That's when I realized he didn't really see me anymore. I was just part of his routine, as predictable as his morning coffee. So I started seeing Jordan regularly. Not because I wanted to hurt Brad, but because I needed something that was mine, something exciting and passionate and alive. Megan was completely supportive. She'd known me since high school and could see how much happier I was. "You deserve to feel desired." She told me, "Marriage shouldn't mean giving up who you are." We were careful about it. I'd tell Brad I was having girls' night with Megan, stay over at her place, and Jordan would come over after Brad thought I was asleep. Or we'd meet at Jordan's apartment when Brad thought I was shopping or getting my nails done. It wasn't like I was flaunting it or being reckless. I was protecting everyone involved. And honestly, it made me a better wife. I was happier, more energetic, more affectionate with Brad because I wasn't feeling so trapped and restless anymore. I was getting my needs met elsewhere, which meant I could appreciate what I had with Brad without resenting him for not being everything I needed. It was actually the perfect solution. Jordan understood the situation completely. He wasn't looking for anything serious. He was focused on his career, planning to move to New York eventually. We both knew what this was: two adults enjoying each other's company without any messy expectations or demands. It was mature and honest, and nobody was getting hurt. The only person who seemed to have a problem with my girls' nights was Brad, and that was just because he'd gotten so used to having me around all the time. "You're out a lot lately," he mentioned one evening when I was getting ready to meet Megan. Not accusatory, just observational, but still annoying. "I'm allowed to have friends?" I told him, checking my makeup in the mirror. "You're always saying I should maintain my own interests." I know. I just miss spending time with you," which was sweet, I guess, but also kind of clingy. We lived together, ate dinner together most nights, spent every weekend together. How much more time did he need? I was entitled to have some part of my life that was just mine. "We spend plenty of time together," I said, kissing his cheek. "Don't wait up." This went on for months. Beautiful, exciting, fulfilling months where I felt like I had the best of both worlds. A stable, secure marriage with a man who adored me, and a passionate connection with someone who made me feel alive and desired. I was handling everything perfectly, keeping both parts of my life separate and balanced. Jordan started taking pictures during our time together. Nothing explicit. Just beautiful, artistic shots of us talking or laughing or just being together. "You're so photogenic," he'd say, showing me the images on his camera. "These are some of my best work." I looked amazing in them, glowing and happy and free. Nothing like the tired, routine version of myself I'd become at home. Sometimes Megan would be there too, and we'd all just hang out like friends. She'd take pictures of Jordan and me together, or Jordan would set up his camera to capture candid moments of all of us just enjoying each other's company. It felt natural and fun and completely innocent, even though I knew Brad probably wouldn't see it that way. But Brad didn't understand that you could care about multiple people in different ways. He was too black and white about everything. I kept some of the photos on my phone because they were beautiful and made me happy to look at. I put them in a locked folder so Brad wouldn't accidentally see them and get the wrong idea. But they weren't anything shameful, just memories of a time when I felt like myself again. Everything was working perfectly until that Sunday in January when Brad decided to go through my phone. I was taking a nap on the couch. I'd been out late the night before with Megan and Jordan, and we'd stayed up talking until almost dawn. Brad was doing something in the kitchen, probably meal prep for the week like he did every Sunday. Normal, boring, predictable Brad routine. I woke up to him sitting next to me, holding my phone with this weird expression on his face. Not angry exactly, but intense in a way that made my stomach drop. "I need you to wake up," he said quietly. "Why? What's wrong?" I sat up, immediately alert. Had something happened to his family? I saw what's in the folder. My blood went cold. He'd figured out my passcode, which was incredibly invasive, by the way, and gone through my private photos. Photos that were none of his business, that were locked for a reason. "Brad, listen to me." I started, but he held up his hand. Don't. Just don't. He was scrolling through the images, his face getting more and more closed off. These are time-stamped, going back months. Brittany, months. It's not what you think, I said, which was true. He was seeing everything through this lens of betrayal, when really it was just me rediscovering myself, reconnecting with who I was before I became his wife. Please don't jump to conclusions. But Brad was already standing up, already pulling back into that cold, analytical mode he used when he was making business decisions. I told her we were done. He said, more to himself than to me. I was filing for divorce. Divorce. Over some photos. Over me finally feeling alive again after months of sleepwalking through our marriage. Brad, you're being crazy. We can work this out. We can talk about it. But he wasn't listening. He was already mentally gone. Already planning his exit strategy like I was some failed investment he needed to cut loose. It was exactly like him to make this huge, life-changing decision without even trying to understand my perspective. I'm staying at Mike's tonight, he said, grabbing his keys. I'll get the rest of my stuff later. And just like that, he was gone, 6 years together, and he couldn't even give me a chance to explain. Couldn't even fight for us. Just cold. Calculated abandonment the second things got complicated. I called Megan immediately, sobbing into the phone about how Brad had completely overreacted. How he'd violated my privacy and then punished me for having a life outside our marriage. She came over right away with wine and tissues and spent the whole night telling me I deserved better than someone who would throw away our entire relationship over nothing. He's being ridiculous, she said. You weren't hurting anyone. You were just being yourself. Jordan was sympathetic too when I told him what happened. I'm sorry you're going through this because of me, he said. I never wanted to cause problems in your marriage. You didn't cause anything? I told him. Brad caused this by being controlling and inflexible and completely unwilling to understand that people are complicated. I kept expecting Brad to come home, to cool off and realize he was being irrational. We'd had fights before, not many, but a few, and we'd always worked things out like adults. But days passed, then a week, and he wouldn't answer my calls or texts. He'd blocked me on social media like I was some kind of stalker instead of his wife. Finally, I drove to his office to try to talk to him face to face, but security wouldn't let me up. Said Mr. Davidson had left instructions that I wasn't allowed in the building. His own wife, banned from his workplace like I was some kind of threat. The humiliation was unbearable. That's when I realized he was serious about the divorce thing. A week later, some guy in a cheap suit showed up at Megan's place, where I'd been staying since Brad apparently changed the locks on our condo, and handed me a stack of papers. Divorce papers. Actual, legal divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting division of assets. Like our entire marriage meant nothing to him. Like I meant nothing to him. I called him immediately, crying and begging him to reconsider. We can go to counseling, I said. We can work this out. Don't throw away everything we built together. But he wouldn't even take my calls. His lawyer sent a letter saying all communication had to go through legal channels now. Legal channels. For a marriage that was supposed to last forever. That's when I got my own lawyer and decided to fight back. If Brad wanted to play hardball, I could play hardball too. I told my lawyer everything. How Brad had been emotionally distant for months. How he'd been more interested in his work than his marriage. How he'd basically abandoned me long before I ever met Jordan. How he'd violated my privacy by going through my phone, then used what he found to justify destroying our life together. He's been verbally abusive too, I added, because it was true, maybe not screaming and yelling abusive, but that cold, dismissive way he'd shut down conversations when I tried to talk about our problems. The way he'd make me feel stupid for wanting more excitement in our relationship. Emotional abuse is still abuse. My lawyer nodded and took notes. We can definitely work with this, she said. Emotional abandonment, verbal abuse, invasion of privacy. Plus, you've been out of work taking care of the household. You're entitled to spousal support. The court hearing was a nightmare. Brad showed up looking all professional and put together, playing the victim perfectly. His lawyer had somehow gotten copies of all the photos from my phone, which should have been illegal, by the way, and presented them like evidence of some major crime. But they were just photos. Pictures of me laughing and being happy and feeling beautiful. Since when is that grounds for divorce? I tried to explain to the judge how Brad had been neglecting our marriage. How he'd driven me to seek connection elsewhere through his emotional abandonment. How a marriage is supposed to be a partnership. Not one person working all the time while the other person slowly disappears. My client was seeking the emotional support she wasn't receiving at home. My lawyer argued. She's the victim of a pattern of emotional neglect that drove her to find companionship elsewhere. But somehow Brad's lawyer made it sound like I was this calculating cheater who'd been lying and manipulating everyone. Like I'd planned the whole thing instead of just trying to survive in a marriage that had stopped meeting my needs. The judge ruled in Brad's favor on everything. Everything. I got basically nothing from the divorce. No spousal support. No claim to the condo. Barely enough to cover my legal fees. Meanwhile, Brad walked away with his perfect credit and his savings account and his precious reputation intact. 6 weeks later, it was over. 6 years of marriage. Dissolved like it had never existed. And for what? Because I'd tried to find some happiness and excitement in my life. Because I'd refused to just disappear into his boring routine. I tried reaching out to him after the divorce was finalized. Sent emails explaining how I felt. How sorry I was that things had gotten so out of hand. How much I missed what we used to have. I wasn't trying to get back together necessarily. Just trying to get some closure. Some acknowledgement that what we'd had was real and meaningful, even if it was over now. But Brad had moved on completely. New apartment. New phone number. New everything. Like I'd never existed. Like 6 years of his life could just be erased and forgotten. That's when I realized how selfish he'd always been. How everything had always been about what Brad wanted. What Brad needed. What worked for Brad's life. The second I'd tried to have something for myself, he'd thrown me away like garbage. The second our marriage required actual work and compromise and understanding, he'd bailed. So yeah, maybe I got a little intense about trying to get through to him. Maybe I sent more emails than I should have. Created a few social media accounts to try to reach him when he kept blocking me. Maybe I drove by his new place a few times, just trying to understand how he could move on so easily from everything we'd shared. But that's what you do when you love someone, right? You fight for them. You don't just give up the second things get complicated. The grocery store thing was completely blown out of proportion. I saw him there, looking perfectly fine and happy, like our divorce hadn't affected him at all. And I just wanted to talk. Just wanted 5 minutes to remind him of what we used to mean to each other. But he acted like I was some kind of dangerous criminal, calling security and making this huge scene. "You're trying to kill me," I shouted, because that's what it felt like. Like he was systematically destroying every trace of our life together. Erasing me completely. You left me with nothing. Which was true. I'd lost my job because of all the stress and drama. Lost our home. Lost my financial security. Meanwhile, Brad was thriving in his new apartment with his new life. Completely unaffected by the destruction he'd caused. The police showed up and treated me like I was the problem. Like I was some unhinged ex-wife instead of someone who'd been abandoned and discarded after 6 years of devotion. They made me spend 3 days in the hospital for evaluation. Like wanting to talk to my ex-husband was evidence of mental illness. The doctors there were just as bad, asking all these leading questions about my episodes and my behavior patterns. They diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. Like there's something wrong with having emotions about your life falling apart. Like it's crazy to be upset when someone you love throws you away like trash. But here's the thing. Everyone seems to be missing. I'm fine now. I'm living my life, working on myself, moving forward. Meanwhile, Brad is probably still the same boring, emotionally unavailable person he always was. Just with a different address. He might have won the divorce, but he lost someone who actually loved him. Someone who was willing to fight for their relationship even when things got messy. And that's his loss, not mine. I know who I am now. I know what I want and what I deserve. I'm not going to settle for some passionless, routine existence just because it's safe and predictable. I want excitement, passion, someone who sees me as more than just a piece of furniture in their perfectly organized life. Jordan moved to New York like he'd always planned. We still text sometimes. He's doing amazing things with his photography, traveling all over the world, living the kind of adventurous life I always dreamed about. You should come visit sometime, he wrote in his last message. The city would suit you. Maybe I will. Maybe it's time for me to have my own adventure, my own fresh start. Brad can keep his boring condo and his predictable routine. I'm going to build something better, something that actually feeds my soul instead of slowly killing it. People keep acting like I'm the one who messed up, like I'm the one who should feel guilty about how everything turned out. But I was just trying to be happy, trying to feel alive in a marriage that was suffocating me. If Brad had been willing to grow and change and fight for us, none of this would have happened. If he'd been able to see me as a whole person with needs and desires instead of just his convenient wife, we might have worked things out. But he couldn't do that. He was too rigid, too selfish, too scared of anything that might disrupt his perfect little world. And that's not my fault. That's not something I should have to apologize for. I loved him. I really did. But love isn't supposed to make you disappear. Love isn't supposed to turn you into some domestic robot who exists only to make someone else's life easier. I deserved more than that. And I was brave enough to go looking for it. Maybe that makes me the bad guy in his version of the story. But in my version, I'm the one who was willing to fight for something real. something passionate, something worth having. And I'm not sorry about that. I'm not sorry about refusing to settle for less than I deserved. That's the real story, not the version everyone else wants to tell, where I'm some villain who destroyed a perfect marriage. The version where I was a woman trying to save herself from disappearing completely, trying to hold on to who she was underneath all those expectations and routines and compromises. And you know what? I'm better off without him. I'm better off without someone who could throw away 6 years without even trying to understand my side of things. I'm better off without someone who saw me as replaceable, disposable, not worth fighting for. Brad got his quiet, predictable life back, and I got my freedom. In the end, we both got exactly what we really wanted.